On this week's Hockey Inside Out, the Habs offense finally show up as the Canadiens are on the verge of making the playoffs. Who would have thought? That and more in this week's show. Welcome to this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. My name is Adam Susser. This show is being brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal. That's the one on Drummond Street, across the street from the Bell Center. Joining us on today's show, we have Pat Hickey from the Montreal Gazette joining us from Toronto. You're in Toronto, Pat, right?
Yes, I am.
And Jess Rusnak from CBC Daybreak and former NHLer and Montreal Canadian Rick Green. Nick Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and Jeff Petrie have each been big contributors to the Canadiens' offense so far in this series. Out of those three players, who has been the biggest surprise for you?
For me, it's been Jesperi Kotkaniemi, mainly because of right before the NHL season went on pause, he was sent down to Laval Rocket. Many people were starting to question the Montreal Canadiens if they made a mistake drafting him third overall. And I feel like people weren't necessarily fair with him, not giving him enough time to develop as a hockey player. And I'm sure he was not happy about that he was not playing in the NHL, and he wanted to prove people wrong that he is a good and effective NHL player. He has no playoff experience. He came to Toronto and fit in right away with the Montreal Canadiens lineup, making an impact right away. And that's really silenced the critics right now. So I think Jesperi Kotkaniemi has been the biggest surprise, and he's been contributing when the Canadiens need him.
I also have to agree with you, Jessica, with Kotkaniemi. I'm really impressed with the way he's shown up, since they've returned. He's been a big impact right from the get-go. He seems to be confident. He seems to be involved. He seems to be contributing in what a lot of people were hoping to see him do. And I think as a young kid that just turned 20, I think there's nothing but good things as we move forward, and as he gains more experience, I think that we're going to see him develop as a very solid, good player for the Canadiens.
I would have to agree with both of you. I mean, KK, when he came in, when you first saw him, you thought, this is not the same guy. He's done a tremendous job. You've got two young centers. Center's been a big problem for this team for the better part of the past decade. You've got two 20-year-olds, Suzuki and Kotkaniemi, and they're both playing outstanding hockey. Suzuki, I don't think it's a surprise that he sort of pushed Max Domi out of that number 2 slot. And the thing that's surprising is that he does everything so well. He's got a tremendous upside, and I think that they're set at that position for a couple of years to go.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to watch Jesperi Kotkaniemi. He does look like a different player in these playoffs. He physically looks different, and it's great to see him just throwing his body around. He still smiles, maybe slightly less, but it's more of a menacing smile, and I'm really enjoying watching that. Jonathan Drouin finally showed up to play in Game 3, scoring a goal and registering 4 shots. Can we expect more of that type of play from Jonathan Drouin?
Well, we certainly hope so. This is the way you started out the season. He was on almost a point-a-game pace when he got injured the first time around. He had dealt with 2 injuries last year. The first 2 games, he was a passenger. He was just out there. The good thing about his goal was that he was in the spot. If you look at where he was when he scored that goal, he was right in front of the net, and he deflected a shot. He had 4 shots on goal. He had a couple of hits. He's getting involved, and I think he was stung by some of the criticism after the first 2 games. He just didn't show up those games, but last night he showed up. Showed up big.
And I think we hope that he's going to continue to contribute. I mean, to see him healthy is obviously a huge bonus. And now the big question mark is, can he consistently find ways to add to the offense? And hopefully from last night's game, getting that goal and kind of changing the momentum, he's going to put that one into his thought process moving forward, that he's going to have to find a way to do that each and every game and each and every shift.
A lot of times when you talk to the players, they say, you know what, it's just one goal, and then that's really what opens the floodgates for more goals to follow. So hopefully that will be the case with Jonathan Drouin. And I think it's also because it was such a pivotal goal as well, because things were not looking good for the Montreal Canadiens up until that point. And then when Jonathan Drouin was able to score that goal, it really gave the Canadiens more momentum and carried them through that game and allowed them to pick up that victory and going into Game 4 with a 2-1 series lead. So hopefully that momentum can carry on. Jonathan Drouin, Pat, as you mentioned, he was really non-existent for the first 2 games, and he's someone who definitely is aware of what's being said about him, and he doesn't like that. So in order to change that, you have to show up and play, and he finally did, and we'll see if that can carry over.
Well, that could almost be said for most of the Habs offense. I feel like in Game 3, it was sort of their coming out party. Why do you think it took them so long to start scoring goals?
This is the playoffs. Everything, the defense gets tighter. Rick would know that. It's an entirely different game, and I think last night what they did was they played their game. They played a very simple game. They put a lot of pressure on Pittsburgh, and they were rewarded. The goals, most of the goals weren't pretty. The prettiest goal was Jeff Petry's. I mean, he says that he saw the spot there. Well, to take his word for it. But, I mean, that was just a great goal. And, this is a team that has to work hard, and last night they worked hard.
And Pat took less penalties as well, which was a huge factor. If you look in Game 2, especially that second period, they were in and out of the penalty box, and it's hard to score goals when you're constantly killing penalties.
It didn't look good in the first period. They took 2 penalties and they gave up 2 goals. But then they played a very tight game. They didn't allow another penalty until the less than 4 minutes to go, and they came up with a big penalty kill on that one.
And what else can I say other than the defense being the smartest players on the team? But seriously, they really were effective in helping out in the rush. They were very much involved, and they were very selective in the way that they jumped into the play. And obviously, they got the results with 2 of them getting huge goals. And it basically backed off the Pittsburgh's ability to defend, because they were coming in waves, but intelligent waves, and they weren't putting themselves in high-risk situations, which would have allowed Pittsburgh to counter. So if they continue to use their intelligence and be effective in jumping in there in selective areas, obviously you can see how it pushes Pittsburgh into trouble.
I also think that if there's a way that the Canadiens can forfeit their power plays, they'd be even better. You know what I mean? Because they just can't seem to get it done at all on the power play. In Monday night's game, Max Domi was moved from the 4th line to one of the top lines between Tatar and Gallagher, but then was moved back and sort of juggled around on Wednesday night, or the lines were juggled around. Do you think there's room for Max Domi permanently on one of the top 3 lines?
Well, I think the kid, he needs to get a chance. I mean, everybody's talked about him, not getting as much ice time, but ice time is deserved. And, he's got to figure out that when he gets an opportunity to play, he's got to make things happen. And, until he finds a way to get his game back, he's going to be ineffective. And he better figure it out sooner than later.
I think Domi and the Canadiens are both trying to figure out where he fits. He wants to play center. That's what he considers his natural position. But he can't take faceoffs. Whenever they've had him out there, they've had somebody else on the line take the faceoffs. There's really not much room for him on any of the top of the 3 lines. So they've got to figure out. And as Rick says, he has to produce. When he starts producing, 2 years ago, he was their leading scorer. And everybody said, is that an aberration? And then, the numbers just aren't there this year. And the other guys have stepped up, and he hasn't. And that's one of the things that he's got to deal with.
And it's kind of one of those situations of what have you done for me lately? You could look in the past, as you mentioned, that he stepped up his game then, but if he's not producing now, and especially in the playoffs where it has to be right now when things happen, you can't just, bump him up the lineup because of what he is capable of doing if he's not showing that night in and night out. And hopefully Domi will be able to up his game, much like when we were talking about Jonathan Drouin. Domi's kind of the same way. He wants to be known as, one of the great players on the team. And the way to do that is by, scoring some goals or setting up teammates for a goal. And if he does that, then he will be able to get some more minutes.
Here's the other thing. He's in a contract year. and he didn't do much for his bargaining power this year. I suspect that when he does sign a contract, it's going to be a bridge deal because the Canadiens aren't going to be interested in a long-term deal, and he hasn't done anything to deserve the money he thinks he probably should get.
And I think these guys too have to realize, really, there's this is playoff hockey. There's no time for excuses. Don't talk about the ice. Don't talk about ice time. Don't reach for different things for giving reasons why things are not happening in your favor. You've got to grab a hold of the opportunity, everybody, and make things happen now, because as we're seeing in the other series, it can be over pretty quickly.
Pat, you mentioned it's a contract year for Domi. Can you see him going to another team, or do you see him staying with the Canadiens?
No, I mean I think he's a restricted free agent. He can't really go anywhere. I think he's a good player. The question is, what's his value? That's going to be the question.
Okay. 3 games into this series with Pittsburgh, which Canadiens player has been the biggest disappointment for you so far?
Can I put a team like a unit? I would say the Canadiens power play. This has been the struggle for the last little while. They've been working on it so much throughout training camp, and the playoffs is really where the power play can make a difference. And the Canadiens power play really hasn't been effective. And it's just one of those things. Will it ever be fixed with the Montreal Canadiens? And what will it take to finally have a power play that you can rely on?
And I think they're going with different combinations this year. It seems like a funny time to start rebuilding your power play at the beginning of the playoffs, but it's just the way it's happened. And right now they're still in sync. The thing that was impressed me last night was that they scored 2 goals coming out of power plays, and they built up some momentum during that power play. Coaches will tell you that sometimes building momentum and getting some pressure on the team during the power play, even if you don't score, if you can take some momentum out of it. And last night, the Petrie goal and Jonathan Drouin's goal both came within seconds of the power play ending. So, Paul Byron's goal came within seconds of a power play ending, and that's a good sign.
And I think the topic of conversation for quite a while now has been their power play, and you can hash and rehash what they should do, who should play, the X's and O's. But now playoff hockey, really it comes down to finding ways to get pucks to the net. And as you're seeing with the way some of the goals are being scored, they're not all pretty. They're going off deflections. And I remember back even so many years ago that trying to kill penalties against a team that found ways just to get pucks to the net was the most difficult thing to defend, because you're usually going to be an outman situation, and the rebounds usually go in favor of the opposition. So anyways, I'm sure there's lots of discussions happening on that, and they're going to have to find a way to chip in moving forward if they want to advance.
I mean, it's nice to watch the Canadiens on the brink of actually entering the playoffs, but I can't help but wonder when I watch these games and see them getting better, how far they can actually go with a horrible power play.
It's 2020. Anything can happen this year.
Oh, that's very optimistic of you, Jeff. All right, well, that's all the time that we have for this week's show, which has been brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal. That's the one on Drummond Street, across the street from the Bell Center. Who has been your biggest disappointment as a Canadian so far this season? Who has been the biggest pleasant surprise for you? Let us know in the comments section below. My name is Adam Susser, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.